Welcome back. This is Real Talk, which means we talk all things that are real, which is basically everything, unless you're going to be fake. And for that, I'm joined by Holly Hazlewood. How are you, Holly?
Hi, Katie. How you going?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm I'm really well, despite being in lockdown as half the country is. Trying to make every day count as best as I can and stay busy and trying to stay positive through what is otherwise a pretty difficult time for a lot of people.
Do you feel like you just keep using that, like, oh yeah, hashtag grateful, I'm really grateful, everything's going to be okay. But deep down, you're like, no.
Well, I won't lie. Obviously, yeah. I mean, I'd like to be at work and doing normal stuff, and I live in Canberra. For anybody who doesn't know, so we kind of dodged a lot of the lockdown stuff for a really long time as we watched it happen in Melbourne and Sydney and other parts of the country, and we just kept waiting for it. It's going to come here eventually, and then it's here now. So yeah, as I said, it's easy to get caught up in like just the doom scrolling, which I do find myself doing and looking at numbers and press conferences and and all that type of stuff, which I'm sure a lot of people are. But I don't know. It's just trying to sometimes just look out the window and yeah, things aren't great at the moment, but they could be worse.
Yeah, that's true. We'll be grateful for what we do have and not what we don't have right now. But by the way, thanks for remembering to dress appropriately in maroon. You got the memo?
Well, I got that. I got the memo that you sent out. Yeah, obviously, warm colours for winter, obviously. So I'm glad we could match between for today.
Great taste. Now, people are probably going, who is Holly Hazlewood? We're about to tell you. Before we start, though, two things. Solemnly swear to only tell the truth and be real in this podcast. Can you agree?
I'm wearing my realness right now, so yes, I solemnly
Yeah.
swear.
Authentic as well. All right. And Holly,
Mhm.
one word to best describe yourself.
Oof. I thought about this and I thought, oh God, I don't want to sound too up myself or anything, but honestly, and we'll get into a bit more about this, no doubt, as to why this word matters to me. But free, and I guess freedom. As you can tell, I'm transgender, and yeah, after a long period of time in my life of questioning things about who I was, how I felt, the world, who would, how they would perceive if I ever said anything. Yeah, I've I've taken the plunge and I'm out and I'm living freely, I guess, and free of a lot of previously held misconceptions and stereotypes about societal encoded gendering and even down to clothes and what people look like and should look like and all the rules that we kind of inherently are just born into and we don't a lot of the time don't question it. It's only when something doesn't quite feel right you're like, is there a different way of doing this? And you know there is. So free, I think there's a lot of different ways that freedom and free means to me, but yeah, just inherently not having to hide who I am anymore and not being ashamed of how I feel, which I was for a really long time.
Yeah, you have quite the story. And for me, for a word for you, I pick brave. Because I think it would have taken so much bravery to be free. And when I first came across your story as a colleague at NRL.com, I was blown away and I was also really proud of you. But the first thing I thought was, wow, she had to be so brave to make that decision. So yeah, really, really proud of you. And we're going to get into it and talk about your story. So let's do it.
Let's do
Um,
it. Let's get into it.
okay. Like I mentioned, I met you at NRL.com and I actually met you as Scott. That's a past life. You're now Holly.
Yep.
Holly Hazelwood.
Yep.
Tell me
Hmm.
your story.
Wow. How long have we got?
We've
This
got 20
podcast might go on
minutes.
for a while. Okay, we'll rip through it in the shortened version. But funny that number 20, because it probably took me about 20 years to kind of get to that point where I'm sitting in front of you now. And I grew up in central west New South Wales around Bathurst Orange. For anybody who knows that area, I grew up on a cattle property. I played sport and things when I was a kid, and I had what you would call a pretty typical kind of childhood, really growing up in that kind of area. And it wasn't until my sort of middle teen years that, as I said before, I just started to question things and go, hang on, I've got these feelings, and I had intense shame and guilt and denial for a long period of time, like not just a year or two, but every time these feelings would surface. And I grew up in an era where there wasn't the access to information that we have now. Smartphones weren't a thing. The internet basically didn't really exist. And so I didn't know what this meant. I thought, I was the only one who felt like this, as a cliche as that sounds. And yeah, so this lived with me for a really long time. And, I went to high school, went to university where I did sports journalism, which is kind of how you met me, originally. And, it's all through my 20s. And, on the surface, everything looked, normal, whatever normal is nowadays, really, or what society perceives to be normal, or how society thought I should have been living. And, I didn't have that many complaints, but at the same time, I use this analogy sometimes for me, and it could be different for every queer person who takes a long time to come to terms with who they are and how they feel. For me, all throughout this time, it felt like I had a silent screaming in the back of my mind. Like, that's the only way I can kind of a metaphor to describe it. It was always there, it was always persistent. And, you may not have been able to tell looking on the surface, but, in a way, behind closed doors, so to speak, just that feeling was always there. And, I had relationships come and go. And, eventually got to my mid-30s, which is where I'm at now. And I kind of just didn't want to die with any regrets. Like, time moves so quickly, and I didn't want to wake up one day and I'm 80 and then I go and then didn't take the time to try and figure out who was I? It's such an existential question. And a lot of the time, most people don't really need to answer that. But I guess really specifically for transgender people, it's such an important question, but you don't really take the time to unpack what that means. And so, I split with my ex-wife, and we still maintain pretty good friends now, but we're just going in two different parts of, our life, obviously. And it was at that point that I actually had the space. I'm like, okay, now I can finally figure out what all this means. Like, how important is this to me, and what action do I have to take to get to where I want to be once I figure that out? And it's all happened really quickly. I've only really been out as trans for a couple of years. And so I've packed a lot of stuff into that time that, when we used to work together at NRL.com, I think I last sort of saw you in person, and obviously COVID kind of wrecked the last couple of years and things, but it might have been the open press day before the 2019 grand final, and you came down to Canberra to do stand-up TV interviews with the Raiders guys. And, I won't lie, at that point, I was pretty desperately unhappy because, I in my story that was published on NRL.com a couple of months ago, I used the analogy of, like, on the weekend, I would dress and look as I wanted, but then I'd have to, like, take nail polish off and stuff in case Elliot Whitehead looked down and saw that I had nail polish on when I was holding my phone near his face. Like, these are legitimate things I have to think about. And so eventually, through a combination of self-reflection, which was over a long period of time, but it came acutely when I had the time, the language to really kind of describe how I felt. And then the more I got a taste of living like I am now, I was like, well, I can't go back, and I think it was only reinforced with, I kind of colloquially say I was girl on the weekend and boy interviewing Raiders players during the week. And I was miserable. I was happy for 2 days of the week on the weekend and miserable for 5. So I'm like, well, this ratio just kind of sucks.
At least make it 3.5 for each.
I know. Can we, halve it or something? Anyway. And eventually it just sort of dawned on me. I'm like, look, you've only got one life. And I just wanted to see what this meant for me. And as difficult as it has been coming out, and I've probably lost some people along the way, I still wouldn't change it because of that word freedom and free and being free. So that in a really very short nutshell, that's the last 20 years or so to get to where I am now talking to you.
I'll never forget because I'm pretty sure it was about the first time that I'd met you at that open day, and your eyes looked dead. Like I'll never forget because I hadn't met you
Really.
before, and I thought that guy's so lovely, but he looks so sad. And so I think it must have hit me more when I saw the article. And I feel like emotional even reading, like thinking about reading your article now, because I think it made me so happy for you. Made me so happy that I could then relate to why you were so sad. And it was because you weren't you. And now you've got this bravery to be you, and it's the most beautiful thing.
It's it's kind of funny, like you're not the first person to kind of make observations like that. I'm still really stunned when I hear that, and I'm kind of like, Jesus, was it that obvious? And like, like I was there doing my job, and I was excited that the Raiders were having a great year, and they're off to a grand final, which was great, and everyone, that was an exciting literal day of open day, and all the guys were jumping out of their skin a couple of days out from the grand final. But yeah, you would think as a sports journalist, like that's what you live for, to be involved in bigger moments. And yet all you saw was somebody who was dead behind the eyes. And I'm like, it sounds melodramatic to people who haven't had to question themselves. But I mean, we've all been down and sad, and people do suffer depression for different things in their life. And I guess I was at that point. It was just a very specific kind of depression, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it keeps steering me in different directions, and I'm sure you can appreciate as a journo. There are so many things you said in that where I'm going, oh, I don't even know where to start. But when was all this stuff that was happening, that noise in the back of your head, what did it
Mm.
come down to? What was the final straw where you go, all right, I'm not me and I need to be me. I need to find me.
It was just I don't know if it was necessarily a straw that broke the camel's back kind of moment, but it was just not being able to tell people, like just kind of hiding from people. And I don't like keeping secrets from people. I never really have. And so, I was keeping secrets from my ex-wife. Like I wasn't telling friends or family how I felt. And this was not just before I came out, but for years, like I was scared. I was legitimately really scared that I wouldn't have, if I came out, I wouldn't have any friends. I wouldn't have a partner. My family would, turn their backs on me. Like these were all legitimate concerns that I had. And so I think it was just trying to take back control over my life, though, in a way. Not that I really lost control of my life, but it was just kind of like living one full life instead of two half lives, which, right before I fully came out, that's what it felt like. I was just sort of a split person, really. And so I wanted to kind of bring myself back to be whole. And no matter how I looked and, and what I was wearing, even still, I can, I'm not always glammed up and dressed up to the nines. Like, when I roll out of bed in the morning, I still feel whole because I have accepted how I feel. And, it took me a very, very long time to get there. And I still pinch myself. I still kind of go, holy crap, I've actually done it. It's like
Yeah.
after 20 years of not really knowing what this looks like, what on the other side of the looking glass, to use an Alice in Wonderland analogy, of like, I've stepped through that now and I'm like, oh, this is what the other side looks like. Cool. So it was never one specific incident. It was just trying to like, look, again, we're only around for so long. I just want to be happy. And this is what happy looks like to me.
You can tell me if this is stepping too far, but the breakdown of your marriage, was that to do with you wanting to find yourself?
Yes and no. Obviously it was an element of it. My ex-wife kind of knew this was a part of me, but to not the extent that like I hid it from her. Like I think that's part of why it came such a shock to friends, family, and everybody else I told, like I did such a good job at hiding and suppressing this that even for myself, I honestly felt like it was subconscious at times with me. So it wasn't like I wasn't the stereotypical flamboyant kid who's going to turn out to be, grow up to be gay or trans or whatever. Like there were no signs, so to speak. So obviously, you know, that was part of it. But also, we were just growing apart in different ways. Like we were together for about 10 years, but I mean, testament to her, for example, when I went and saw my mum and dad, obviously, you know, she had a relationship as a mum-in-law and father-in-law. We'd broken up by this point, and it was kind of irreconcilable. It wasn't, unfortunately, anyway. We're going to come back from this because I was starting to accept more of myself. But she still came with me to literally just sit there if I needed the emotional support in when I was coming out to my family. So she drove 3 hours with me, sat there for half an
Oh,
hour, and then I was like, you know, and then she's like, "Do you need me to stay around?" I'm like, "Oh no, that's okay. You can go now." And then off she went. So you know, there's things like that. That's why I'll never be like, I can never be spiteful against her or hold it against her. I mean, sure, that was a really, really difficult time, and it kind of is difficult because I'm like, oh, well, I'm starting to embrace who I am, but some of my worst fears are coming to life in that people closest to me wouldn't be able to accept me fully. So it was a double-edged sword, and with some distance, I've been able to put that aside. And part of me will always love her, obviously, but it's just not, the most of who I am now. Does that make sense?
yeah, no, that makes sense. And the
Yeah.
family situation, that's has it been a double-edged sword? Is the family situation as good as you'd like it to be?
In a word, no. Again, I knew this would be hard on my family, and I think this is part of the reason why it took me more than 20 years to kind of say anything about how I felt. Because I grew up in a regional area and there wasn't a lot of queer visibility of people. I didn't see a trans person walking down the street in Bathurst, or not
Yeah.
outwardly, I guess, in the early 90s or something like that. So there was just no point of reference for my family. And I knew that that was going to be one of the real sticking points before I told them. Like mum even joked, well, not joked, but said that once I told them, a little bit of time had passed and she had to actually Google what transgender meant or was. So she wasn't actually sure. And yeah, it's been really difficult because like I had a reasonably close relationship with my family, but like I haven't basically seen them since I came out to them, which was just before Christmas in 2019. And I haven't talked to my older brother. I basically haven't talked to my dad. Well, they haven't talked to me as well. I should kind of rephrase that a little bit. And mum is trying, I will give mum credit for that. She's trying. But it's kind of also one of the worst fears I had for a very long time manifested in terms of there hasn't been vitriol, there hasn't been spite or any anger thrown back in my face of like there are worst case scenarios in what I'm going through, but it's just a wall of silence that I'm I've told my mum this, and it's just like for the first time in my life, I actually don't know how my family feels about me. It's something that I've never had to consider until now, because I always had a rough feeling that they were proud of me and they were proud of my achievements personally and through work and whatever else I was going through. And now I don't know if that's the case on top of everything else. But yeah, it's just that, occasions like birthdays and Christmas and stuff like that, when normally I would see them, and now I don't. And yeah, it hurts, especially when I think this is arguably one of the most exciting times of my life, and they're not getting to share in it. And I try not to be spiteful and turn around and go, well, it reflects worse on them than it does me, and I've done nothing wrong, which I haven't. but it's still hard to still hard to, when I've had this, when I've felt so apologetic about how I felt for a very long time, it's still hard to cross that boundary and not be apologetic to my family when they haven't accepted me fully. So I'm not writing them off, but I will be honest in saying I've moved a part of them out of my heart a little bit, because I would go through cycles where it'd be every month or 6 weeks, it'd be a Tuesday night, and I would just find myself crying for no reason because I haven't heard from my family, and I don't know when or if I ever will. So it's not ideal, but I still wouldn't change things, and I hope that one day they can kind of come around a little bit and start to learn and start to get to know me again in a different way. But I'm still, a lot of the things that I stand for are still, like, I haven't completely changed. But it's a lot to take in. But I hope that one day we can kind of reconcile.
Yeah, rejection hurts whether you're queer or straight. So I can't imagine what you're going through with the ones that you were around your whole life and have so much love for. It's incredibly difficult for you. And I hope they do too.
Yeah,
I hope they come around.
yeah, I hope they do. It's just things like, I lived overseas for 2 years. I lived in England, and I saw them more often than when I lived on the other side of the world via Zoom than I do now, and they live 3 hours up the road. Obviously, COVID's probably preventing us from seeing each other anyway at the moment, but even if COVID just suddenly disappeared, I wouldn't be going home to see my family every weekend, because I don't really think they want to see me right now, to the point where for Idaho Day this year, I actually got interviewed by Channel 9 down here in Canberra, and I asked the TV journalist, like, oh, is this going to be a pack? Is this going to be sent out to different bureaus? And they said, oh, it's going to be sent across New South Wales. And my brother, who lives in Yass, would obviously get Canberra news. And so I'm trying to think of their feelings so much. I sent my family a text and said, more specifically aimed towards my dad and my brother, and I said, look, I'm going to be on the news tonight, and if you don't want to see me, don't watch the news, because they literally haven't even seen a photo of me since I've
Wow.
started to transition. So they've got, as far as I know, they have no idea what I look like. And I was trying to think of their feelings at that point, and then I got no thanks for that, or no acknowledgement that I was trying to do that. So it's just things like that that hurt. But again, I hope that one day they can come around and hopefully see the error of their ways a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope so. I hope that it sounds like that's been a really tough part. The positives I feel from your story are outweighing the cons right now, and I think self-happiness is one of the most important things. And that's probably another reason why I think it's so important to have people from all different backgrounds and people of all different sexes to be speaking on Real Talk, because someone told me recently, if you don't grow up with something around you, and queer people in small towns is not something that you're exposed to all the time,
No.
but something that you may feel more comfortable with if you just continue to see it. And the world is changing to make everybody feel more comfortable, but it seems it's a very generational thing.
It is a very generational thing. And again, my dad's like a multi-generational farmer in his early 70s. And so that case in point, like, I have made this joke a few times, but the only kind of diversity that I ever had growing up were Pole, Hereford and Angus, which, if anybody doesn't know, they're breeds of cattle.
Yeah.
That was the only diversity I had growing up. Me trying to make light of my situation.
I know. And I'm also thinking to all the city people listening, they've probably got no idea that they're breeds of cattle, but
yeah.
I'm glad you...
Well, that's why I put the qualifier in. So, yeah, they probably just see rump or porterhouse, and it's like, well...
Wagyu!
Anyway. Well, exactly. But, no, like, I understand, and that's why I'm really proud to be visible, because, visible at the NRL, and as far as I was told, I was the first openly transgender employee the NRL ever had. That was kind of covered in the story that went out earlier in the year. And, even like I've gone back to university, and I'm studying exercise physiology and rehabilitation at the University of Canberra. And, there's parts of the uni curriculum that I'm pointing out as like, well, this needs to be a bit more inclusive. And then even my lecturers are going, well, yeah, you're right. And then this needs to change. And, I'm getting recommendations to do master's or PhD work in some of the things I've raised. Even like the part-time jobs I'm doing to put myself through uni again. Like I've had some of the most amazing sort of interactions with people, for one of my jobs I work in a very busy shopping center where, on a decent day, 30,000 people pass through the mall. And the number of times I've been, it's like, oh, you work at Westfield, don't you? So, if I had $1 for every time that's happened, I'd have about $87. It's happened so often.
Need to ask for more than $1.
Yeah, I know I should start giving away like $20 for a photo and an autograph.
Yeah.
But seriously though, it's it's just those things. Again, it's that normalization, and that if people hopefully, and that's why I appreciate opportunities like, coming on and chatting to you, and I think for a lot of my friends who knew me before I came out, like, as far as I know, a lot of the time, like, I might be the first queer person that they've met because of where I grew up. Maybe not, or maybe the first trans person. And so, that's why I appreciate opportunities to, like my story on NRL.com, to come on your podcast today, of just like, hopefully some of your, viewers or watchers or listeners, if they've never seen or heard from a trans person before, hopefully they can just listen to what I've said and realize like, oh, she's pretty normal, got hopes and dreams and likes having fun with her friends and likes bad reality TV and sport and, all the normal things that everybody else does. Like, I've just taken a different path to get here than most other people.
You say it so well. The journo coming out in you, I swear.
A little bit, yeah, I know. It's like,
it's good.
Anybody think I used to do this for a living?
So, for people who are listening and going, I just can't wrap my head around it. I don't understand how somebody just can't be a boy or can't be a girl. What do you say to those people?
It is hard, because if people have never had to question, their gender or their sexuality, it is quite difficult. But it's like an itch in the scratch of your brain, at the back of your brain, that you can't scratch. And there's just something, you just like something's wrong with the world. And it goes deeper than just like, for example, around that time that you mentioned that you kind of met me for the first time, I really hated my reflection in the mirror. And it's not just like, I know we all kind of have issues with our bodies and we wish something could be better or smaller or bigger or whatever. But it goes to much deeper than skin deep. I didn't see a person that I identified with. Like, I didn't like how my body looked. I didn't even like the clothes I was wearing, and I don't have a great answer to that question, to be honest, because, it's, the only kind of answer I would say is that, if people kind of hold on to these ideals of what is male and what is female, and even like just the societal encoding of gender, that boys are blue and girls are pink. And if you actually do your history, if you look back on it, the colors used to be flipped about 120 years ago. So not that long ago, really, where boys would be pink and girls would be blue. So it's not even that long ago in recent history, things like that were not held. And, people need to understand things, even something as basic as clothing does not have a gender. If you think about why can a female presenting person wear a skirt, but then if a cisgender male wears a skirt, everyone just freaks out. It's like, it's just a bit of fabric. It's it's the external meaning. It literally is, or shoes or makeup or jewelry or whatever. It's the external sort of imprint that we put onto that. It's like, oh, guys don't wear that or girls don't wear that. It's like, who says? Who says? So that's a bit superficial, but it also speaks to a deeper meaning of, this is the stuff I kind of had to go through and unpack and learn. And, this is all still relatively new for me, but it's still important for me to kind of figure out, what do I like? What kind of person do I want to be? When I'm not only I'm changing how I see the world, but obviously how the rest of the world sees me. So, I mean, it's not a great answer. It's a bit long-winded, but I just hope that people are understanding that, gender and sexuality are spectrums. I understand that most people live at one end of that spectrum, but, it's okay for people to express themselves however they want, because, again, you're only around for so long, and you don't want to be, miserable because society puts you into a box, and that's not the box you want to be in. You can be anywhere you want to along that spectrum.
Yeah, I think that's a great way, and it wasn't long-winded at all. I think it's just asking for a bit more understanding, making people think twice about that whole society realm and what we should and shouldn't be. Because you're right. What is it with fabric? I do believe that the younger generations are a lot more comfortable in themselves and kind of don't give an fuck. Like, they're just very true to themselves, which I like. What are you enjoying most about now being in your own skin and being Holly?
There's a lot of things, because that's a great question, actually. And because it's not all doom and gloom, and it's not all abandonment from family, and, I won't, don't get me wrong, that stuff still exists, but there's just so many positives. You kind of even, and this is part of what I've had to unpack as well a little bit, really looking at what I used to do, activities, what I used to wear, even what the food and drink I used to consume when I was in my early 20s or something. I thought, why was I doing that? Was I doing it just because of the where I grew up and what was expected of me by society? I grew up in a country area and I played rugby union and I drove a ute and I drank rum. It's well, that's about as cliche as it gets. And it's did I really enjoy all of that? So now what do I enjoy? I enjoy, fashion. Apparently I've got a very good eye for fashion, and a lot of my cisgendered female friends are where did you get that jacket? Where did you get those shoes?
Wow.
So apparently, I'll show you my Instagram later. You'll freak out.
No, I've been looking at your Instagram. I've been loving it.
So no one taught me this. I love my mum, but mum didn't sit me down as a 13-year-old boy to teach me how to put an outfit together. I had to teach myself how to do makeup because I love playing around with that stuff. I love drag, for example. Here in Canberra, a lot of my friends are performers, and pretty much every weekend I'm going to one of their shows and supporting them. Incidentally, my girlfriend also does drag, so I'm always there supporting her as well.
Oh, so, okay, you got a girlfriend. Like how you just put that in there subtly. Yes.
Sort of snuck it in there a little bit.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and she's she's been amazing. I guess that's part of the reason why it took me a while. No one's going to want to have be a partner with me, and then I found this amazing person, and she's accepted me entirely, and she's just such a great positive influence in my life. We have so much fun, and so I mean that makes it, I no doubt, a lot easier in having somebody to share life with, and I support her in all the things that she does. So it's just opening myself to what do I want to enjoy, not and it's kind of funny what you were sort of saying before about the behind the eyes thing. like people have said things like, you don't feel like you're trying to fit into a mold of what people think you should be. And like, this is external um, feedback from people. Like, they're noticing things in my body language and kind of how I talk and stuff like that. And they're people that are just like, oh, it's like, this isn't an act. Like, I'm not, all this stuff is inherently and just innately pouring out of me. And it's like, I'm not having to consciously think about what I'm doing and saying anymore. So, yeah, there's so many little things, and just interacting with people in a much more, I guess, natural kind of way. And yeah, just
Mm.
like, I can like everything. I can still like rugby league, and I can also like, doing my nails and doing that at the same time, doing my own shellac nails while watching the Raiders. Like, that's a thing I can do. So,
Yeah, you can do whatever you want. Even by just meeting you when back in 2019, you know how I mentioned the dead eyes, and
mm,
even the way you presented yourself, the way you spoke, you came across as sure, sad, but just like a chiller. Like even the way you spoke was monotone. So now when I talk to you, there's so much life about you. You're wearing makeup, and like you look great and you're happy. You've got your nails done. You're in maroon. Like, come on. There's so many, and I can
I
only see the physical side of things here, but I
yeah,
know you're wearing high heels. We've spoken about you mentally feeling a lot better too. So the
yes,
pros are up here. The cons are, pretty down the
yeah,
bottom.
yeah. No, they definitely are. Like, nobody. I haven't talked to a single, and yeah, the road is bumpy for a lot of queer people who come out. It's not always smooth sailing. It can be for a lot of people, but once people kind of come through that rocky period of actually telling people and the world kind of being in flux for a little bit, because it's like when you're telling someone you're coming out, it doesn't matter how you're coming out, whether it's sexuality or gender, no matter how the person reacts, your life's going to be changed forever, for good or
Mm.
for bad or somewhere in between. So once you get that through that period, like I just now find myself smiling sometimes for no reason. And it's actually to come yet again back to that metaphor we've talked about of dead behind the eyes. I remember once a photographer asked me, he's like, oh, can you smile? Like, this is before I came out. And he's like, oh, can you smile with your eyes? And I'm just like, what the hell does that mean? And I was trying to do it, and I must have been pulling some weird face because we all had a laugh about it. And I looked back at the photo and I was like, oh, at the time, I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. But now it's an expression I use all the time, that I smile with my eyes. And people, longtime friends of mine and stuff like that, when I post selfies online, because like I now actually, and this kind of ties into what you like when you ask me what do I like and what's good about coming out. Like, I now feel confident in my own body, and this sounds a bit, again, it sounds a little bit up myself, but for the first time, I actually find myself sexy. And, when before I never really thought it, I was like, I would just see my body in a mirror or something. I'm like, oh, there I am. And that's about it. Like, I never had innately had that kind of confidence in myself. And now I kind of understand why. And now it's changed. So, look, yeah, the pros are definitely through the roof. I still get to pursue a lot of the things that I wanted to do. Like, I'm very grateful that jobs and things like that weren't taken away from me. Like, the NRL supported me. The jobs have supported me when I've applied for them as my authentic self. Hopefully in about 4 or 5 months' time, I'll graduate with my new degree. I can get to start a new career. So yeah, the future looks really bright, and I'm really happy. And hopefully some of the negative things clear up soon. But if not, I'm not going to stop being me. I'm not going to slow down for anybody, really.
Good. Never do. I feel like I am taking all of your time and I'm going, oh my God, I still
No,
have to
not
ask
at
you
all.
two quick questions. But people are
No,
probably going,
ask away. I got all the time.
okay, okay. People are going, so what's this got to do with sport? Well, you worked part-time for NRL.com and you covered the Raiders very closely. Now, just briefly run us through how difficult that was or how easy it was coming out to a group of what we would classify alpha males.
Yeah, as we've alluded to, like the first 2 seasons where I would go to every press conference. Like I'm based down here in Canberra, and I pretty much exclusively, covered the Raiders as part of the NRL.com new media arm that got brought into existence a few years ago. And yeah, I'd go to all the press conferences during the week. I'd go to home games. I'd be in the sheds, talking to guys after games, and obviously visiting teams and things as well, visiting coaches and Ricky Stewart. And so yeah, they had this preconceived idea of who I was, and I had a really good working relationship with all the players, and but then again, when I kind of told our former bosses at NRL.com of like, this is my plan, they were great. I can't, as I kind of alluded to in the story that went on the website a few months ago, like I couldn't have been supported better by the whole team. The team kind of got word that something was changing when I changed my name on my Twitter bio, and apparently a couple of the players went to Ben Pollock, the media manager, and went, "Oh, what's this about?"
Social
But
media.
yeah, like I know it's got the reach. Well, I was actually kind of just pleasantly surprised that any of the Raiders players looked at my profile or anything I posted. So I'm like, oh, okay, they read my stuff. That's good.
Tick.
But no, so like the club and NRL.com, they arranged a meeting, and so pretty much the players had a bit of an inkling what it was about. But yeah, like as you say, there was pretty much the entire NRL extended squad, plus all the associated staff, trainers, pretty much everybody in the club piled into one room. So I won't lie, that was pretty intimidating. And Ian Roberts also came down to kind of just give me a quick intro, which I can't thank him for enough as well. Like such a sweetie, and he did that for me, just as a link between a former player and obviously now very much an outspoken gay and queer icon in inclusivity in sport and in Australia. I told them a smaller version of what we've done here today, my story, and a couple of players asked questions, and then a couple of them just gave me handshakes, and that was kind of it, and we moved on. And my time there over the last couple of years has been interrupted, unfortunately, a fair bit with COVID. And if I do get a full-time job with my new career, then I'm not sure if I'll be able to continue. But it's been great. Like just a really, really quick story about just how well it has gone. Because I really, as you say, the NRL unfortunately always hasn't had the greatest relationship with cisgendered women over the years. And then I'm stepping in, I'm like, oh, this could go a million different ways wrong. But I wanted to try. I wanted to give it a go and just see if it didn't work. Well, at least I could say I tried. But really quickly, in terms of like how good the guys have generally been, even though they've only seen me periodically because of COVID. Like when the Raiders lost to Newcastle when they went over in Wagga earlier in the year, and it was like the fifth loss in a row they had, and unfortunately Jack Whiten got tapped on the head to go and talk to the media after the game from the Canberra side of things, and he didn't want to talk to us. Like they just lost 5 in a row, and they were on a bit of a slide, and there was 2 male journos alongside me, and Jack went to say, I could see what he was about to say. He was about to say, come on boys, let's hurry up and get this over and done with. But he stopped himself before he said it and goes, come on boys and girls, let's just get this show on the road. So he stopped him. He knew what he was about to say. And even in that moment of intense disappointment of having lost another close game that they probably should have won, he still stopped himself and corrected himself and gendered me correctly. And like I made note of that. And I told the club afterwards, and I said, oh, look, can you just thank Jack for me for that? Because like I appreciate, I'm not a professional sports person, but I can appreciate the pressure that they're under. And when things aren't going well, and it was, as they generally haven't sometimes for the Raiders this year, Jack didn't have to do that, and I wouldn't have blown up, and I wouldn't have got angry at him in that moment. So I'm like, yeah, he doesn't want to be talking to the media because they've just lost again. But in that moment, he still corrected himself, and it meant the world to me. So that's just a very little anecdote of how well it's been, how well it's gone, and if this is indeed my last year covering them, which it might be now that COVID's wrecked things again a little bit in terms of like not have games with GAO. Yeah, I'll appreciate everything that was done to try to make my time there as comfortable as possible, and hopefully I'm not the last trans person to work at the NRL.com or the NRL, I guess, and just hopefully other people can see that it's possible.
Yeah, you can work anywhere, no matter what you are or what you go by. And I love that Jack
Mm-hmm.
did that because, see, it's a little thing, but it goes a long way. Last
Yeah.
question. So you mentioned the
Yes.
physical appearance and changing into Holly. What's happened now? Like, did you want to lose weight? Do you want to be a certain do you take certain steroids? Like, this is probably getting personal, but I did watch a
No,
couple
no,
of
no.
your YouTube videos, and I know you'd gone to see a GP about taking some sort of hormones. So where you at?
Yeah. So, so basically, transgender people can undergo medical transitioning, and this looks different for a lot of different people. And I also just want to sort of put it out there that this isn't a prerequisite. You don't need to undergo medical or any kind of physical transition or to be trans. But for me, it was more, again, I wanted to see if this fit my mind and body. So essentially, yes, I've been on the hormone replacement therapy for about 18 months. And what that involves is me taking a testosterone blocker and then also taking a synthetic form of estrogen to kind of essentially give me an endocrine system that's very similar to a cisgendered woman. So it's effectively like I've been going through puberty for a second time in the last sort of
Haha,
18 months.
sucked
So
in.
actually, this one's been pretty good. This one's actually probably
Oh,
better than the first one. I know. Although emotions have been, I cry even more now than I used to before. Like I'll see a puppy on on Instagram, and I'll be like, start crying.
I should have laughed.
No,
Sorry. Puberty sucks.
I know. So I'm going through it again in my mid-30s, which is awesome. But no, it is actually really good. And like, um, I think that's just only reinforced. This is actually very much me because like I haven't felt bad or run down, or if anything, I've got more energy and I feel more alive. And,
Wow.
as you can appreciate, you know, um, I've lost a little bit of weight, but that's just because it's moving around. Fat patterns are moving, from a more traditionally male pattern to more traditionally female. My skin's better, hair's growing, you know, and it just affects me sort of mentally in a way that, like, again, I move through space more confidently. Like, I
Mm,
talk with my hands more, and this is not me thinking about it, doing it. It just happens. So yeah, as I said before, I actually kind of find myself a little bit attractive now, which is again a weird thing to say, but it's like it's something unfortunately I don't think a lot of people can or do feel about themselves. So, and it really sucks that that's the case. But I'm, you know, loving the skin I'm in, and so yeah, I'm really excited for what the future might hold in that regard as well.
Holly, you're alive. And I'll use my hands as well because it makes me so happy. That was awesome. Thank you so, so much for being, I guess, brave enough and free enough to have a chat with me.
No, thank you so much for the opportunity, and hopefully people either learned something or were just entertained by my craziness. So thank you for the opportunity. Thanks, Katie.
We're all crazy.